Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney, and every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
To the highway in a brand new day. Gotta let it go. Fast to freedom. Stars tonight together. Here everybody's singing. You can't know what your part. Hope you find my one that you.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate for May 6, 2025. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on social media at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, you can click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site. You click the red box that says sponsor this podcast and accept a one-time or recurring donation. No obligation, but we would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts. It's your old pal, Mike Spears, joining alongside, as always, your other host, Case Lowe. In case we're about to get really into the nitty-gritty for a second here about something that touches both of our professional lives, you know, in a way that I don't think people kind of realize.
Can I take a guess?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Is this, are you finally going to unleash your Nico Harrison was right all along take that I know you've been holding on to, that, you know, Luka Doncic is not a championship caliber NBA player? I know you've been afraid to say this because of the woke mob ever since the trade in January, but I feel like you're finally ready to unleash that take.
No, I'm still a LFFL. Unlike Rich Craich, who, you know, he believes in the process. I mean, you saw that in proof in person in Vegas. No case.
It's funny talking to Rich about Luka still. We're like, you know, it was like mid-April when we saw each other, and it was like I was kicking his dog in front of him in real time. It was just, I was like, God, I still feel so bad for all these Mavs fans, and obviously, Nico Harrison wrong. But no, I'm curious now. I have no idea where you're going with this, so I'm curious.
Have you ever thought about how disgusting microphones are and like the windsocks on there? Because I've been picking off dog hair off of my shirt that, like, it's on a boom arm. It never touches the ground, but it accumulates so much crap on it that I'm now desperate to think if there's a way to get like a cleaner, or if I just need to get a new windsock on this thing. Like, have you ever thought about that at work? Like how each of the microphones, at least by the end of the morning shift, like you really don't want to run like a blue light just because of germs and stuff.
Yeah, some of the ones at my work are pretty gnarly, but that's because they're now, I mean, the windscreens on those things are probably 9 years old. And corporate America not exactly eager to make a change on those. I think they're going to be there for another 9 years. I do laugh because I've got the mic that we do this podcast with, which is a Shure mic, and I've got the boom arm with it. But I've also got 2 handheld mics that I use a lot of the time when I go on location and interview a band at a venue.
Sure, yeah.
I'll, like, depending on what cameraman I get and what camera they have, sometimes the microphones can plug right into the camera, which is great. Sometimes I'll run the audio through Adobe Audition on my laptop, and I'll just use the handheld mics that I've got. And I have laughed in the middle of interviews thinking about insert semi-high profile band here, and they're talking into a microphone that has my dog's hair on its windscreen. That does make me laugh. It doesn't necessarily gross me out, but I can see once you start thinking about it, it's hard to not think about.
Yeah, and at least I don't know what's the case with Freckles. Pudge is a really for the breed of dog he is. He sheds an awful lot, especially
Yes.
at
Yeah. No. Same here.
change of seasons. So like right now, I've been like on the prowl because my current house is not good for like a RoboVac. That I just basically go around about. I would say that this takes up a considerable portion of my week, like over 10 minutes a week. Like if you look at like free time and like this, the amount of time I spend dealing with dog hair is a lot higher than I thought it would be at this point in my life. And now I'm looking at my windscreen, I'm going like, God damn it, pluck, God damn it, pluck, God damn it, pluck. But that's just something that is just deeply personal and existential that I have to deal with. Like, I mean, you get a dog like Pudge, you're just going to have Pudge hair everywhere. Like,
no,
I try.
I get it.
I try, but it feels like it's a losing battle.
Obviously, with that in mind, we are here to do a full breakdown of the Eastern Conference NBA playoffs and the teams that remain. That will be the next 2 hours of audio. And, feel free to jump in wherever you'd like to.
I was going to say, Case, we actually have a somewhat timely question in the Discord about why the Giants hate. You're going to spend the next 2 hours illustrating why the city of Milwaukee are a bunch of frauds, right?
I tell you what, that city, the people there, the teams there, God, what a shithole, to quote one of our more infamous U.S. politicians. That place is just not for me. And they showed their true colors again. As we were recording last week, it was the end of the Pacers-Bucks game where the Pacers, for the second year in a row, knocked the Milwaukee Bucks out of the playoffs. And yes, there was an issue with Tyrese Halliburton's father confronting Giannis on the court, which wasn't appropriate. And like a responsible and respectful organization would do, Halliburton's father has been reprimanded. Everybody immediately said, well, he was in the wrong, and we all moved on from the situation. Unfortunately, what that did was it did distract people from the fact that although Giannis was not the antagonist in that situation, he did immediately after that walk up to Pacers shooting guard Benedict Mathurin and grab him by the back of the neck and once again start another confrontation with the Pacers. It doesn't matter if he ends up as a Milwaukee Buck next year or a Houston Rocket or on the Brooklyn Nets, wherever he goes. The guy's completely out of control. He acts completely inappropriate all the time. Nobody seems to want to talk about it. He's still doing the like, oh shucks, I'm just happy to be in America routine, which I stopped buying 4 or 5 years ago. I can't believe this isn't a bigger national story of Giannis just continuing to lose his cool in an aggressive and violent way. But, it doesn't matter because he's not playing basketball anymore. And for the second year in a row, the Pacers have knocked the Bucks out of the playoffs and bring on Cleveland as we sit here recording during Game 2 of the Eastern Conference semifinals between those teams. Feels good, Mike. Feels very good. We've kept this strong core unit together. We had success last year in the playoffs, and we said, what if we ran it back? Same team and everything. We're actually more healthy than we were at this time last year. What if we just kept everything the same? I wish your basketball team would have done the same.
There used to be a time, Case, where you could get an edge by being one of the foremost franchises in international scouting, and you would be able to convince people to trade you picks that you can go find absolute wonder kids from Slovenia and Germany. But we just don't live in that world anymore. Case.
We don't. It's too bad.
It's a real gosh darn shame. As the Rangers are in a very rainy Fenway Park tonight. Let's talk about Dead or Alive. I feel like we've beaten around that bush a lot.
The final one.
The final Dead or Alive, and also the final Dragongate show at Dolphins Arena, a.k.a. Nagoya Prefectorial Gymnasium, was just business up top. They claimed a higher attendance this year, and it felt that way. So I don't know how much of hey there is to make of that, but at least big picture takeaway in some ways, at least for me, Case, I feel like this was the perfect farewell to Dragongate's traditional big Golden Week show, at least in this venue and in this context. But I feel like we'd be remiss without, after we talk about big picture, getting into the big story of the show, and that is the cage match and the turn of Madoka Kakuta against D Courage, and perhaps also the situation of Dragon Dia and how that maybe marred a what could have been a big moment cage match. I know you wrote a bit about this in your review that just went up right before we were recording, but big takeaways you had coming out of Aichi from Monday.
Yeah, there's a million things here to talk about. In terms of the attendance, up from last year. For comparison's sake, what did they say this year? They said 3389. 2019 was 4563. So still 1,000 less than they claimed in 2019. But as I pointed out in the Voices of Wrestling Discord and the Dragongate channel, you can scroll up and look at these messages. But I was tracking the attendance for this show very, very closely. Normally before a big show, or maybe, sometimes Korakuen, I'll flip on the ticket page where you can buy digital tickets. That, of course, doesn't include, as we were talking about with Jay over this past weekend, the word of mouth, the hand-to-hand ticket sales that Dragongate still does. But I'll go on the website and just see where things are at. And of the 8 sections that were available, the 8 different ticket sections, 5 of them were sold out. And the other 3 that were left were marked as only a few left. So this is very clearly a show that did well. I'm very happy that we don't have to spend a ton of time on the attendance, and we don't have to spend a ton of time, really any time, on the production of this show, because this looked like a major league show. I think you would agree with that.
Yeah, and this was always a building that Dragon Gate had that care that just has not been there in Yokohama that we talked about with Jay over the weekend. They've always kind of have had a certain prestige to the show. So I came into the show expecting that we were going to get the full stage, 2 entrances, UT's dad's friend doing a whole lot of the sponsoring on the show. You had his company right on the entranceway, but also I think other than a general snafu that was happening early on in the show that was easily remedied by the second main card match, overall, I thought production on the show looked great. There is a period of transition, of course, and Jay and Ho talked about this on the English feed, that this year, because of using the Gaora feed, since the satellite has just gone away, we were able to get about 15 minutes pre-show, which let Jay and Ho talk some and preview the card, but also give us a match 0 for the first time in a few years. But the other side of the coin was that I don't know how, and I will, or why, and I'll ask about this, but the intermission break to put together the cage, there was just the empty ring, and they're building the cage instead of having a condensed match where they would have in big shows previous. But I'd walk away from the show, at least presentation wise, this felt very much as how we expect and how we should want Dragon Gate production. It's not that I want to have the crazy stardom video boards and all of that, but it felt like a big show and it came off like one.
I would agree with that. Show overall, it's a weird show because as I start to think about it, again, I think we rate a lot of these shows on this scale of what has happened from World 2021 onwards, where, that is when GM Saito was publicly anointed as the GM, and I feel like we went through a definitive era change and era switch when that happened. So I gauge a lot of our big shows by what has happened since then, and I feel like we've lived in worlds where either we've gotten really strong builds to shows that maybe haven't lived up to expectations, or we've gotten big shows that maybe don't have great builds, but have been really good shows and execution. I think about like Dangerous Gate last year being one of those where I don't think anybody was super stoked going into that, but like that ended up being a really, really good show. And unfortunately, this falls to the former, where I think top to bottom, the booking from February to May was incredibly strong. You had a great main event angle. You had an interesting world champion who was doing something parallel to the main event angle we saw play out in the cage. You had interesting stuff going on with the titles, the Twin Gate belts. And then also, I think this Paradox Triangle Gate run that was very entertaining whenever they got a chance to show their stuff. You had what was going on with the Brave Gate belt, which for a long time was vacant and dormant and cold, but when they heated that up, I liked the execution of all of that. And then you had stuff like Valletta on the undercard, Mochizuki Dojo on the undercard. You had all these things that just made this promotion feel really full and really vibrant. And in no way, this is the tough part with analyzing this show in a big picture perspective. In no way was Dead or Alive a bad show.
No, not at all.
I think if you showed me the star ratings on paper, which, as I pull up my review here, I mean, it was a show that at times over delivered, but a show that also painfully under delivered in a really big moment. And I'm kind of stuck processing that still. But
I'd argue 2 moments.
I liked one match way more than everybody else, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah. But not to cut you off there, but you had like these 2 kind of things that hinged on the show, being the Dreamgate and what happened in the cage. That if things were more fortunate and maybe Daya doesn't get like mess up his elbow, maybe that we have a planned angle that does not happen, and they had to improvise, like 2 coin flips in this show would have been a show of the year contender, really.
Yeah, because my star ratings, I go 3.5, 2 3/4, 3 flat, 3.5, 3 3/4, and then I think I deviate from people going 4 on the semi-main event. And then the underwhelming match, which was to me the main event, which I went 3.5 stars on. But even if you just pitched me that and you said this is going to be the show on paper, I would sign up for that. I would go, that seems like a really good time. Sure. I'm into that. And I largely think this was a very good show. I just think this was a weird instance where they spent all of this time and all of this care building up this really intricate and deep main event angle where there was no consensus going into this match. Some people thought it was going to be Ishin losing his hair. Some people thought it might be Daya. Some people thought it might be Yoshioka. I saw a Kakuta contingent out there. It was this very interesting match where you could talk yourself into a lot of results. I would like to point out that I nailed this prediction, just couldn't have been more right about it. But a lot of different results were at play here. And it ended up being a situation where the main event angle, although there was a big picture thing that I liked about it, and I want to spend an extended period of time talking about that, the execution of it felt a little bit flat. I think they missed something here, and whether that's related to Daya or not, I do not know. I doubt we'll ever know. It did just seem like it was missing something, and the show ended maybe not on a cold note, but certainly not on a note that inspired any confidence. And I do feel like there's now a hurdle to clear for this Korakuen Hall show on Friday where they really need to bring it. And that needs to be a buzzworthy, newsworthy show. I think they can do it. Again, I think the booking's been pretty stellar this year, but the final half hour of this show did not hit the way that I was hoping that it would have.
Yeah, and I would say also the air was not completely out of the building with Daya. Like there still was a couple of moments within the cage after Daya's escape that, I mean, like the whole Johnny Valletta thing brought the crowd right back into it. So I don't say maybe Daya was involved as a way of giving them a pass on it. I just think that when you look at how Kakuta just kind of abruptly just chair shot Yoshioka after he hit a frog splash on Shun Skywalker, and then just kind of, you know what also was some of it too? Shun really stalled for Kakuta to get up on the top to do the simultaneous flagpole because Kakuta wanted to do the rolling lariat. So I feel like there was a little bit of also that and it's not to like to say that the turn sucked. It just felt like that we have seen over the years.
I think the turn might have sucked. I think that's the problem is even if I'm excited about the direction that they might go in with this, which is the possibility of Shun, Kakuta, and Minoura as a 3-headed dragon at the top of the heel unit, which I think is great. I think the execution did suck. You know, that is the problem with this because they had a hot crowd and a crowd that was into a lot of that match, and the Kakuta turn
got back into the match at that moment when it was the 3 left in the cage too. Like that's important to note. Like the heat was back on, completely back on after the Daya incident.
But the Kakuta thing, and it's my main issue with it, is D-Courage had all of this tension from March onwards when Yoshioka came back, and it was really compelling in the way that they used Daya Inferno and the way that Yoshioka kept losing, and the fact that Kakuta was justified in a lot of his grievances with the unit. And then they go into Kobe, they wrestle each other. They leave Kobe going, okay, well, we're all on the same page here, which, that became a red herring. After the Kobe match, I sort of knew where things were going here, where, they talked about how they're all on the same page and their goal in Nagoya is going to be to take Shun Skywalker's mask off. And they're a tighter unit than ever before this. Then the other thing I go, okay, well, obviously somebody's turning here. I think it's going to be Kakuta. But the problem is they worked this cage match like a tight unit, like friends. Kakuta and Yoshioka, they literally lift Dragon Dia to the top of the cage so that he can get the flag with his bum arm. Now, you can make the argument, and I did as I was watching this match. I go, well, okay, Kakuta's beef was with Yoshioka, not Dia. It would make sense that he wants to help Dragon Dia out. He's pissed that Dragon Dia had to team with Yuki Yoshioka in the tag league because Kakuta feels he would have been a better partner. But as you get to the finishing stretch of this match, right before the turn, it's Kakuta and Yoshioka doing flawless teamwork together, taking out Shun Skywalker as a tandem and wrestling, close to being the best of friends. And there's never an errant battle hook. There's never an errant hip attack. There's never anything that would signal.
There's never like an Inferno kind of tease.
No, there's never the thing that signaled Kakuta's cue to snap. It was the type of lazy thing that Dragongate doesn't typically do. One of the things that I omitted from my written review, but I was trying to put in there, and I decided it was too much off the beaten path. I didn't want to get into it. But you think about what we widely recognize as one of the most disastrous angles in company history, which was Kai versus Kondo, summer of 2022. The lights go out during the Dreamgate match in Korakuen. Coach Minoura appears. The Coach Minoura debacle, as we've dubbed it, that all kicks off because of that. For all of the flaws with that angle that were there in real time and have certainly only gotten worse in the 3 years that have followed, the best thing they did was they over-explained. They went out of their way to explain that Rita is the one that shut off the lights, that this was an orchestrated plan by Minoura. He had his henchmen, at the time Minorita, now Rita, turn off the lights in Korakuen Hall, and that's how all of that happened. And we were just missing that thread of, and all it has to be, again, is, all Kakuta had to do was eat a lariat from Yoshioka. And I think this whole thing comes across better, but it just looked silly having these guys 1 second work so well together, like they could have won the tag league had they teamed up. And then the next second, it's a chair shot to Yoshioka's head, and then they're climbing the cage, that being Shun and Kakuta, and they're escaping. It was just disappointing because the rest of the feud felt like there was so much thought put into it, and there were so many details there and so many little chapters. And then the ending just felt really rushed to me. It felt sloppy.
Yeah, and it does, like, in the way that happened with the Minoura debacle, it does feel like that come Friday there seems to be an expectation of, okay, show your work.
And that is, I guess, that is one of the two big asterisks here. One being just the concept of Dragon Dia being injured, and two, there is a Korakuen on Friday, and we do have to wait and see for that show and that show only.
Right, and especially with the way that we now have that full card for Friday, it does lend you to go like, okay, that main event, they're setting the main event as Hyo contra Hyo, so doing that kind of main event there, at least a little bit with our history with the promotion, makes us think that there's going to be an angle after the main event, right? Like,
well, I would expect it to be a super long show. I think we'll get an opening promo. I think we'll get an angle after match 5, and I think we'll get an angle after the main event, which is match 7.
Right. I would say do not expect anything outside, anything before Yamahulk versus Shun and Kakuta to go longer than like 8 minutes at most.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be, I feel like in a way, I don't know necessarily if it is the fact that you also had Dia basically be dragged back in and shave Yoshioka's head with that as well, that there's a little bit of I not that this is the exact same angle as last year's case, but I mean, Shun Skywalker made a bawling Jackie Kamei shave Hyo's head, right? Like there's a little bit of, okay, we've seen this before, that I think also we can consider when we're talking about the end of the cage match.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, look, Shun Skywalker's 3-0 in these cage matches. Or I guess he was in
4-0
4-0 because 2019.
Yeah, no, because he saved Mochizuki Dojo and pieced out.
That's right. But, in the heel era of his career, 23, 24, 25 now, and he's been an absolute menace. And this has become one of his calling cards. And whether the cage match goes away entirely, whether it's moved to a different venue, I don't know what they're going to do with that. But I do know that it's become a thing that has become very character defining for him. And we have now incredible visuals of him and Monte at World, and then especially, the scenes with Kame and Hyo last year, and Daya and Yoshioka this year, that are all commandeered by Shun Skywalker. And it is just another tip in his cap, another feather in his cap, if you will, of we're witnessing one of the great character runs in Dragongate history. And I guess the question has to become, again, there's a lot that I want to get into with this. So I will bounce around a little bit, but we're staying on the cage match for a while. What now do you do with Z-Brats? Because you have
huge.
It's a very, very large heel unit. It is Kakuta now. It is Shun, Minoura, Kai, Ishin, Jason, Kato, Valletta, and Homare. So even if you take away Valletta, that is still an incredibly large heel unit. I have a thought of where they can shed some weight. We haven't talked at all about this show, so I don't know where your head's at, but I'm curious as to what you think is next in the Z-Brats lineage.
I kind of feel like after this whole Decourage storyline gets tied up, that we might be going Z-Brats Civil War, to be honest.
Okay.
Because it's that big, and the unit landscape is now, a unit that the two of us and Jay said, should be faded all the way out. Now it's completely belted up. You look around at the landscape that is changing, like Kakuta is just the start of it. And I look around and I see, okay, Decourage now is functionally at 3, but what is it after what Kakuta's betrayal? So it's like, okay, that's loose end that can get tied up pretty quickly. And you look around to the rest of the babyface roster, and then you take a step back and you go, you have 9 people in this unit and 8 full-timers with it. You've already run the dissension stuff there, and at least like an argument could be made that you have the people that were Shun's people within Z-Brats now, and then the people who kind of just arrived in Z-Brats of their own volition. And to me, with a unit that big and the shape of the other units around here, Z-Brats has to implode one way or another.
It's funny because coming out of this match, not only with the Kakuta turn, but just living through this story, I feel like I'm ready for Z-Brats to kind of get along again. I would like them to show some dominance. I would like them to once again feel like a cohesive unit. I think there's weight you can shed again. Let's remove Valletta from the picture because he's always going to be the same guy, and I believe he's going home after the May Korakuen. So, he won't be around for a while, maybe not until after World. So we don't have to worry about him. But I'm really intrigued, and this will lead into another thing that I want to talk about with just, the fact that we now have such deep relationships with some of these wrestlers and their relationships with other wrestlers. But I'm really intrigued by the idea of Kakuta and Shun together because they've never teamed before. And I think had you asked me last week, had they shared a unit together, I would have been like, yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm sure we've seen them at some point. But I stopped and thought about it. And, Kakuta debuted in the summer of 2020 during the pandemic when Shun was in Mexico. And then Shun came back and was in Masquerade, and Kakuta turned heel and was in RED. And then by the time that Shun had turned heel, Kakuta was out injured. And when Kakuta came back, he came back in the Z-Brats gear because when he got hurt, it was RED. He came back in the Z-Brats gear and said, actually, psych, I'm not in Z-Brats. I'm going to be a good guy now that I've returned from injury. That leads to him being in Decourage, and we've been in this spot ever since. I really want Shun and Minoura and Kakuta to all be in the same unit. That obviously would include Jason because Jason and Minoura are Twin-Gate champions, and I think they're going to be for some period of time. So you leave those guys the same. That's all fine. You don't need to do anything there. As long as Shun's in that unit, that means Homare is going to be in that unit. I wouldn't touch Kato. He's at a pretty uninteresting phase of his calendar year. That could change at any point, and I would encourage them to do something with him at some point. that leaves two guys. You've got Kai there, and Kai's begging for a turn. You could put Kai in Paradox tomorrow. I don't even think anybody would notice. I think it'd be totally fine. He has served his purpose. He's been a fantastic heel. He's been a heel for 5 years. Dreamgate champion during that time period. We've gotten the most we can out of Kai in this current incarnation. Let's kick him out. Let's turn him face. Let's get him in Paradox. And then it also opens the door for, if they were going to do this at the Korakuen show, let's say, it now opens the door for Hulk and Kai, or Kai and YAMATO, to headline Hokkaido shows together and Fukuoka shows together and Kobe shows together on the first run through the market with Kai as a newfound babyface. The other guy that I haven't mentioned, that I actually think is ready for a face turn now, I think you turn Ishin. I think you kick Ishin out of this unit. I think it's a three-headed dragon. It's Shun, it's Kakuta, it's Minora. And I think they have a real chance to permanently establish a higher ceiling for Ishin if they turn him now and use him effectively. I almost feel like his ceiling, if you play your hand right, in prior years when there hasn't been much for Ben, but you can throw Ben in a Dreamgate spot just here and there. You need a Dreamgate match. You need a babyface challenger. It's Ben K.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I feel like that can be Ishin, because Mike, we'll ignore the charisma aspect of this because Ishin is a 1-of-1 right now. But when you think about their size, what does Ishin do that Kakuta can't do? If anything, if you keep them in the same unit together with Skywalker, now you're creating just
and Kato.
You're creating a brute force heavyweight unit that honestly, I think would be out of place of this promotion. I think it would be too big. I think it would be too bruising. I think it'd be too powerful. The other thing is, if he stays in this unit and it's Shun, Kakuta, Minora, and even Kato, who is his direct rival, in the sense of where they're at in the pecking order, Mike, he's hit his head on the ceiling, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a reflection of his performance, but failed Dreamgate challenge. He's been heel for 3 years almost now, 2.5 years. You got to remember, he turned in November of 2022. I thought it was 23, but that's when Kato turned. November of 2022 is when he turned, and he's not going to get a better spot in the pecking order when he's sharing a unit with Kato and Kakuta, and to some degree even Minora. You've got a chance to make him a really, really lovable babyface, whether it's in gold class, whether it's in a new unit. Again, I don't think you can ignore, coming out of this May Korakuen show, I don't think you can ignore the possibility of either Vibes or gold class winning, and Hyo saying, actually, I'm starting my own unit, and I'm taking whoever from whatever unit with me. And maybe Ishin slots in there as well. I think that's the move. I think you've got to explore that, because with Kakuta, I don't actually worry about Z-Brats being too big in terms of roster members. I worry about them being too big in terms of literal size.
Yeah, and I think you've done a good job of selling me on this. The one thing I would add in also to benefit the turn, there's few things that this promotion has traditionally loved more than the heel who has to be forced into being a good guy, and then everyone coming to terms of, like, we don't want to be around you, man. You're a dick. You were an absolute dick. And with where Ishin is with, like, his charisma trajectory, it might be about time to see him flex his chops in that kind of way, because where you say, like, he has, like, that Benkei kind of potential of just being slotted in and being like, hey, Oda Ward's coming up. Why not throw Ishin in there? You know, I mean, he's from the area. Like, he has that kind of thing to his credit. You also have a little bit of Naruki Doi to him also. And,
Oh my God, yeah.
And I feel like in that context, the face turn is something that he very easily can slot in and then further kind of just embraces charisma, because the crowd's already laughing with him. The crowd already likes him enough that the face turn feels deserved and earned. This does kind of come off from a result earlier on the showcase, but I have another person that can make the argument for that we could see them turn face.
Real quick on Ishin, because you're so right. They love doing that story of, this bad guy that's liked by nobody now has to be a good guy and get liked by somebody. And we've been talking about that. We talked a lot about that with Jay over the weekend, of maybe that's the story for Shun, is that he's alienated everybody and he's going to need to find friends. But I maintain, even coming away from this show with the Kakuta turn, it doesn't feel like Shun's done in this current role. And if they turn him, I'm sure it'll be fine. Yes, I'm absolutely fascinated by the thought of Minoru and Lee versus Shun and Homare at World for the Twin Gate belts. I would love that. Be absolutely fantastic. Zero complaints for me if that happens. But I just keep on watching this guy, and it's like he's got more left in the tank in this character, and you can't get this back. Once he turns, you're never getting back to what he's doing now. It feels limitless for him. I just want to see him continue to expand his horizons. Whereas Ishin, it's weird to say this, but he's in a similar spot that Kai is. What else can he do in this character? Like I said, failed Dreamgate challenge, multiple time Dragongate champion, former Bravegate champion, and clearly there is an inherent charisma that he has that people are connecting with, and I think people want to like. This is the time for him. I can't imagine a better time than shaking it up with Ishin, because you got to remember, I mean, when he was still a face, I mean, we're talking about Ishin Ihashi, pink and navy blue singlet wrestler,
Boa.
Yeah, the Boa doing the whole second generation thing with Junior and to some degree Strong Machine J. We haven't seen him as a face slotted anywhere above like a lower mid card position, but he's gone so far beyond that now. Him as a face has real juice to it, and I kind of think maybe, and again, I don't know, this is going to delve too far into fantasy booking, but like, can we see him and Hyo team together? Can we see what that looks like? Because that might be the best option for both those guys.
No, yeah, I think you sold me on it. Let me present a case for someone else from Zebrats to turn face.
Okay.
Oh, what have a big story of Zebrats over the last now almost coming up on a year has been the relationship of Shun and Homare Kato. Homare debuts as Homare Kato. He immediately says, "I'm here because of Shun, and I want to join Shun." And we've seen him kind of explode from there, and then have days like the Rey de Parejas finals where he goes and becomes an absolute made man afterwards. And he walks into Nagoya as the betting odds favorite against UT for the Bravegate, and he's completely nullified by UT. UT had answers for everything, and he essentially tied him in the knot in the middle of the ring until he had to verbally say, "I quit," because he did not have a limb to tap out with. Would Shun stand for his prize protege failing in that kind of manner?
Okay, it's way too soon, I think, for that. But
I mean, he's coming up on a year. His year anniversary is going to be within the next 3 months, Case.
Yeah, but the difference is it's a year of his career, not even a year of him in that unit. I would now. I also had the belief this is going to be a weird side thing, but like, one of my takes when AEW first started was I would keep Cody and MJF together for years and years and years, and I felt like they turned them way too soon. I just keep.
They did everything of Cody way too soon.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Who would have seen that coming? I would just keep those guys together.
But look at Korakuen. Look at Korakuen. It looks like Shun is going to be tied up in with Kakuta right now, and either one of them, I'm looking at them as the Kobe World Main Event right now. They might not have I feel like that you have your three-headed dragon, you have Kakuta in there. There's not going to be a lot of Shun and Homare happening with this now. I mean, I look at that relationship and I go, I think this is a time where they like having their rookies do a lot of different things, especially someone like Homare, who has been from the start noted as he is special. Keep your eye on him. They've already accelerated him to this extent. Why not already turn him face again and have him be like betrayed by Shun Skywalker and him looking for guidance? Like, I feel like that's a pretty good timing for someone that they have obviously accelerated plan with.
I just worry it's one of those things where the potential doesn't necessarily meet the fanfare. I think everybody knows that he's going to be special. I'm not necessarily sure that the crowd is ready for that change yet.
The crowd's has Homare calls like, yeah, not Nagoya, but like an incredibly amount of Homare calls, given the fact that he's a heel over the last few months.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it'd be too soon. I think, again, the problem is when you're a direct descendant of the Shun universe. Like, I kind of just want to keep everything the same. And Ishin, even though he was involved in this match, operates a little bit outside that bubble. He was Switzerland in the Minoura versus Shun stuff and the build of this match. I don't feel like he is a capital S, capital G Shun guy. And I feel like the avenue is there where you can make a guy who can, again, main event shows if you turn Ishin. I think even with a Homare turn, he's still a little bit of ways away from that. I would rather just have him, even if it's, through World Dangerous Gate a year and whatever, if he spends his summer in opening tag matches with, Jason and Kato or whoever, I think it'll be okay. He's had an incredible 8 months, and I'm not sweating his horizon. I just wouldn't change a thing with him right now.
That's fair. But I just like when you have a unit this big and you're not going Civil War, you're going to have to shed eventually. And I think that if you're shedding Ishin, you might also see Homare also and get that down to 6. And then maybe then you boot out Kai and then you do the rebrand. Because I still think that even though Z-Brat stands tall, it's 3 years. It's more than 3 years. We're talking almost 40 months of this unit. And that's approaching now. Not Berserk, but I mean, it's not too far away. I mean, without any dissension, this might get close to a Mad Blanky-esque run where then you have to do a disbands match and kill the lineage and start again.
But I'm not sick of this branding, and I think part of that is, like you got to think like SB Kento was in this unit. That's how long they've been around, but that's how they don't feel like they're missing SB Kento. It's a unit that's continued to evolve as time has gone on. And I feel like they've gone with the times. We used to talk about, there was the summer where Kento was gone and somebody was hurt. And it was
Shun, Kai, and Ishin every show.
Or Shun, Kai, and Hyo even. I was just like, oh God, I'm so sick of these trios matches. But outside of that, it's been a pretty consistently amazing period of time for the heel unit. And it's part of the reason that I'm so hell-bent at this point, even though I was sort of warming up to the idea and borderline accepting the idea that Shun was going to turn. It's why I'm now so hell-bent on keeping him as the figurehead of this heel unit, because for as much as I like Madoka Kakuta, and historically I've really liked him, and this year, I think he's been great. And Mike, I know you haven't kept up with Champion Carnival, have you?
No, I don't have enough time in my day for that.
Okay, I get it. I put All Japan on the back burner this entire year, and then 30 Under 30 is coming up for Voices of Wrestling, and I realized I was like, oh, I haven't watched All Japan this year. I would like to give a fair assessment to Yuma Anzai, who I know I'll rank, and Ryuki Honda, who I think I'll rank. But anyways, I watched Kakuta versus Anzai from Champion Carnival. That's just fucking unbelievable. Like, I went 4.5 stars on it. It's just, I think very highly of Kakuta. That being said, there's a reason I bring all this up. I would not want to be in a position where I'm heading into Kobe World, and business is, on the big shows, steady, dead or alive, objectively good house. Wouldn't hear anything otherwise on that. Growth from the last year, building looked full, building sounding great. I would not want to head into Kobe World with my lead heel units being led by 1A Madoka Kakuta and 1B Kota Minoura. That just feels like a very dangerous proposition. I would continue to have Shun as the 1 and Kakuta and Minoura as your 2A and 2B respectively.
Yeah, that's why I think that this is going to happen after Kobe World, because that they have that match they have that match on Friday where you have Kakuta and Shun versus Yamahulk, and one of the two, they get through Kobe World season, and then with how everything is set up after Oda Award, there's nothing. So that seems like a time that you could be doing this sort of Civil War. I don't think it's happening immediately. It just seems like it makes more sense to me now than them on Friday just putting the boots, the Kai and Ishin, and stepping aside. It just seems like they're going to stay big and then implode this fall to me.
Well, a lot of people have compared the size of Z-Brats now to the size of RED at the end, and I guess I guess we probably have to hop back into the time machine ever so briefly and just talk about the way that RED ended, because I know we have people listening that, they only know what Dragongate with Z-Brats as the heel unit, and RED was a unit that amassed a bunch of guys by the end of it, a far more checkered legacy than Z-Brats. I think Z-Brats historically a much better unit, but by the end of RED, when it was Eita leading and Ishida and Kento when he seemed like the next big thing, and by that point we had lost Kazuma Sakamoto, but Sakamoto was such a huge part of the success of that unit. It
Kyo
was just
finally found something there.
Kyo finally found something. Diamante was really cooking at that point. There was a lot to like with RED, and so what happens is, they enter a situation. They do the double January Korakuen shows, and this is when Shun Skywalker is leaning heel. We all know that he's going to turn. We just don't know how he's going to do it. And in one fell swoop, you get Skywalker turning officially on Masquerade and joining this heel unit, which at the time still had Eita and Ishida. But the first thing Shun does is put the boost to Eita and Ishida, and we have a totally new heel unit going forward, that being Z-Brats. And that is, I guess, the elephant in the room, is you've got Kakuta and Skywalker together. And it's why I started thinking, it was like, well, no, they really need to keep him face, because I don't think you can ignore the possibility of Kakuta not only turning on D-Courage, but doing a hostile takeover of the heel unit and reshaping it entirely in his image. But that goes to my point of, I don't want to be in June and July poking Minoura and Kakuta with sticks going like, all right, guys, spotlight's on. What are we going to do? So I think it'd be much safer to avoid that and not just completely rehash what they did at the end of RED.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see, like, we're entering a phase of the month where after Friday, there's essentially just spot shows, trip to Okinawa, and then the triple shot at the end of the month, where if there are changes that are to come, as you mentioned about Kai potentially getting turned on, you do have kind of that full house show loop. By that time, you're going to be back at the top of the schedule at the start of June. But it is something where, I mean, the end of Dead or Alive, and as soon as the last flag is pulled every year, that kicks off the road to Kobe World. And I think that's why my attention is so drawn to that tag match on coming up on Friday. Any other thoughts you had about the cage match? It's for a cage match that I thought that the bits that they did made it work. Tanaka basically coming out here and being like, "Oh, I know what we need to do here." A crazy dive, and then someone solving the Johnny Valletta problem. I think that does go down as one of like the all-time top 10 maybe steel cage warfare Aichi moments. But I feel like that, like, this cage match, just because of the note it ended on, we're probably going to be thinking about this towards the middle or the back of historical cage matches in this company.
I've got two more things on this cage real quick. I'm glad you brought up Tanaka and Valletta. I thought that whole thing, that 90 seconds, because it's not like Valletta was out there very long, perfectly executed. Couldn't have drawn that up better. The inclusion of Valletta, which I really just, he was out of sight, out of mind, so I didn't see it coming. And then Tanaka doing the big dive, Tanaka not dying on the big dive, the way they just all that. Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah, just amazing moment there.
Are you under the impression, as we sit here still first week of May before this Korakuen Hall show, that it is YAMATO versus Kakuta at Kobe World?
I feel like it kind of has to be that, because if you're running Shun versus YAMATO in this incarnation that ends YAMATO's run, basically, like I feel like that YAMATO still has more wheels or more gas in the tank in this run, and that lends me to think Kakuta puts him out with the lariat, says, "I'm taking the belt at Kobe World on Friday."
And then I guess the follow-up to that is, do you think it destroys Kakuta if he challenges YAMATO and then loses at World?
No. I think that he kind of like he kind of then at that point, it doesn't feel like that we are that he's Shingo in 2013. You know, just as a frame of reference, the last. And I mean, I guess you can talk about YAMATO 2016 in that, but really, the title
who beat
run
him?
that
Mochi?
Who beat Yamato in that run? It was Mochizuki. Yeah. But,
See, and that felt like a cultural reset in the same way that Shingo beating Yamato or Shingo beating Shima and then Yamato beating Shingo did. It's almost the same effect. Mochizuki was like just a calming, neutral presence at the top of the card.
right, and I would argue that this isn't the same scenario as 2013, where Shima did all he could do, that he was literally going back through past challengers throughout that run. And you get like the story of that Yamato said at that building last year that he is the wall, and that and that he's going to hold this belt until the person who's ready to run with the ball beats him for it. And having that contrast with the guy who tried to proclaim the next era of leaders, I feel like that's a Kobe World main event, and Kakuta losing in that scenario after the heel turn doesn't hurt in that.
Okay, I'm with you there. I'm with you 100% of the way there. I was trying to think of people that have lost 2 Dreamgate challenges to the same Dreamgate reign, and I think the only one is Tozawa losing twice
to Shima,
which oddly enough was a Kobe World and a Dead or Alive, which, this would, I guess Kakuta was Dangerous Gate in Kobe World, but, totally different character. But okay, I'm with you there. I have no note there. The other thing I want to bring up just real quick, the aspect of this cage match that I did like, which is sort of an omnipresent bird's eye view type take, is it really struck me just how deep the relationship with some of these wrestlers and the stories that we're getting out of them has become, in the sense that, when you think about pundits that cover Dragongate a little bit more regularly in the 2010s, one of the things that was always applauded by this company was everything matters. Something that happened in 2008 now matters in 2014. Something that happened in 2014 now matters in 2016. And it was a mix of watching this match and also thinking about something Jay said when we talked to him on Saturday about the Bravegate division, and how, we not only have an era of guys that are completely lost in your Kenshin Chikanos and your Yoheis, but also you think about the desecration of the 2010s now, with no Yamamura, no Ishida, no Lindemann, no T-Hawk, possibly no Shimizu here, because we don't know anything there. And in Dragongate, unfortunately, it is the opposite of no news is good news. When people aren't talking, something bad is typically afoot.
And especially, to just jump in, especially since this would mark 6 months now.
And nobody's talking on that front. So I don't know what the deal is there, but it really jumped out to me how hard of a reset this company has had to go through. And, in 2020 is when a lot of that took place. And for people like you and I that watch every show, it's when you're locked in on something new is exciting. When you have any sort of distance from something new is scary, because you feel lost and you feel out of place. But you and I were locked in. So when they brought in Kakuta and Kento and Estrella, and, after that it was the Ihashis, and then, Fujiwara is like, oh my God, this all these new guys, this is so great. And then you've got Shun at the helm, and, really, in like 2020, 2021, the only bit of extended history we had with any of these new guys was Shun and Ben Cages being in the same graduating class, but there wasn't a lot there. But the discourse that I'm seeing in the wake of this cage match, and I think it's the correct thing to talk about, is just how impactful 12-1-21, the Diamante and the Diamante and Dia Inferno versus Shun Skywalker and Dragon Dia match, where Dia loses his mask, was. I mean, that has become, and tell me if you disagree, but I think that's become every bit as impactful to this generation of Dragongate as Naruki Doi turning heel in January of 2005 and joining Blood Generation was.
Yeah, and especially if you look at the Dragon system as a cyclical kind of promotion, because for one, the average fan, like, you get the long-term native fan, but Dragongate has some pretty noted fan turnover where new fans come in and old fans come in. So having these like resets and having like these like formative matches that now, I mean, we're coming up very quickly on 3.5 years since that Apuestas match, and everything really does start there, because from like that, or if you want to have that as like a prologue, you immediately go into, oh, Shun loses his mind over that month, and then fully loses it at that January 2022 double Korakuen. Like you do have these kinds of things where now one has to look at like within the 6 guys of this cage, and especially thinking about the hair shaving and the thing that now whereas Daya really unless there is another Skywalker mind control thing, there is no way in the world that Shun Skywalker and Dragon Daya can coexist on the same team. May 5th, 2025 will be known as that final line between Madoka Kakuta and Yuki Yoshioka in that way. And I think that those are such important moments, and I fully expect for the next however long that this is all like all the animus comes back to basically to how this turn happens, and that's what kind of makes that the turn and the finish in the cage match feel that little bit of underwhelming, because like we look at those moments and we know those as like chapter markers or starts of new books and the overall history of Dragon System. The current chapter started on 12, or the current book started on 12/1/2021, and arguably a new chapter should have started yesterday, but it does not feel that way. So I'm hoping that we are going to get we're going to get the work shown, and then we can now then go like, oh yeah, Kakuta was stewing for however long, and then it finally he played nice until he found like his right moment when he knew he could absolutely ruin Yuki Yoshioka's life. Like I'm hoping that within the next 6 months, year, we're talking about yesterday in that way, and there's one very easy way for them to do that, and that's to show the work on Friday.
But I think I don't think this book is over until either D-Courage or Zebrats no longer exist. I mean,
or Shun loses his mask. Yeah,
which is never happening. I don't buy that as any sort of realistic scenario. So I don't know. I was just blown away watching this match and thinking about the history that we have with Dai and Skywalker, thinking about the history that we have with Dai and Yoshioka, and now in 21, 23, and 25, you have these pivotal game-changing moments with Kakuta and Skywalker specifically at Dead or Alive. And then you've got the Minoru Daya relationship and the Minoru Shun relationship, with the tension that hangs there. Again, it's the thing about Ishin really not being involved in this is he's not really involved in this. He was the first guy out of the cage, which I thought was utterly brilliant. And I do have to wonder if Ishin does turn, if that's brought up as a thing of, Ishin, you kind of left us for dead. Why were you the first one to get out of the cage? That
because he touched up his roots and he didn't want to lose that. Yeah, no, like his logic is faultless.
It's an interesting thing when you look at it from the critical point of view of, it didn't strike me until watching this and seeing how deep some of these bonds are now, just how much history, for lack of a better term, had to be burned with, obviously Shima, but then T-Hawk, who, like it or not, played a big role in 2010's history. And then, Yoshino and Ishida, and just all these little things happen. And it's just like, oh my God, they really did a harder reset than I realized. And this match felt like watching a match from 2014 in the sense where everybody had a backstory with somebody else going in that was unrelated to the build in this match. Like they now have a rich enough history to where whenever these guys are in the ring, whether there's an official storyline there or not, there's going to be history there that you can't ignore. For as much as this match bothered me at times, I loved that aspect of the match.
Yeah, and I think that hindsight will also play. Well, we'll look a lot more favorably on this cage match as we progress away from it, as more is told in a way. Like I feel like that will also happen. The Daya situation of it all. It seems like everything's being played really close to the vest right now with this. I mean, he was on a show today, but he's not listed for Friday. So who to see? I mean, he was evidently in enough shape to come out and do the angle and take that gnarly BT bomb at the end, So, I mean, that's kind of a thing we'll have to wait and see how that aspect of this plays out.
I haven't asked anybody about the Daya thing, but that is important to note. He worked the May 6th house show. He had extra bandages on his elbow, but it wasn't dramatic. It was the type of thing that I think if you just saw the photo and didn't know anything about the cage match, I don't know if you would notice it. So We'll see what happens there. I fully expect him at this point, given what we know now. And again, we're recording this 7:09 Central Standard Time on May 6th. I would expect him to work Super Juniors, and I would expect him to appear on that Korakuen show, and perhaps we'll have an angle as to why he's not wrestling on that show. So we'll just have to see. But we don't know anything right now. But the fact that he worked the May 6th show, 15-minute time limit draw, appears to be a good sign for Daya.
Yeah, I would say so. So the other divisive moment on the show, or also Case, you are the gorilla versus 100 men here on this. They opened the Dreamgate title match. YAMATO making his 7th defense against Jason Lee. He beats Jason Lee with the rear naked choke sleeper after a pulled up Galleria. And I think the way to really kind of talk about this case, because I think we're both at like two, to not completely diametric. I was 3.5 on this. I didn't think this was awful, but I saw what they were going for and it didn't work for me. Having a whole entire match being based around YAMATO going heel, and then also being based around Jason Lee trying to choke out YAMATO at every opportunity.
It really worked for me, and I don't know why that is compared to other people, where this match, again, it seemed to fall primarily into that 3.25, 3.5 star range. I was at 4 on this. It was my favorite match on the show. Outside of, I'll note that Hyo versus Tanaka was perfect, but it was 6 minutes in the opening match. So this was my favorite match on the show. I liked it with all the context surrounding it. I liked it because of the build and how dominant Jason Lee was in the lead up to this match. I liked it in the context of Yamato's title reign. Although Hiroki Goto did have a phenomenal defense against Callum Newman over the weekend, and certainly Goto shortened the lead that Yamato has over who's the best champion in wrestling right now. I think Yamato still has that edge. And I found, this version of a Yamato match to be completely interesting. It was different than the Kakuta match in August. It was different than the Ishin match in September. It was way different than the Kano match and the Strong Machine J match and Dai and all these other matches. This was, Yamato doing spots. I mean, when was the last time we saw him do the under the ring spot? I feel like it's been since Dragongate USA that he's done that. And so to me, this was almost like a movie star, like an A-level star doing an indie movie just because they want to. And this was a full-on immersive Yamato experience, which some people are going to bump on. Some people aren't going to like that. But I saw what they were doing. I liked the story that was told. And I was really intrigued by the idea of Yamato having to out-heel the heel in Jason Lee. I thought they executed what they were going for to an astonishing degree.
Yeah, the note that I had down here that you kind of hit on, this was Yamato's fuck around title match. This was Yamato like having like the 6 defenses that he had. This was kind of the one where he was kind of in his bag and was kind of doing what he wanted to do with it. It was like that was kind of the energy that this match had in comparison to the other title matches. And it's interesting for me, Yamato as like this figure in Dragongate, where there are some periods where he is my favorite wrestler in all the company. And then there are some periods where the prospect of a Yamato singles match, I can almost like call it in my sleep. And maybe if I'm absolutely dead on, I can actually name what the grappling 5 minutes will be and what he does there. This one, maybe I wanted him to work even more heel if he was even more kind of ravenous in that manner. But there are moments for me where he has the eye black, he does the under the ring trick, and even the under the ring trick, it felt a little slow. It felt like he was like waiting and waiting afterwards. And at least for me, like I get that this might be one that if you buy completely into Jason trying to take everything from him and having this level of dominance into him, and then Yamato having to go to this trick to pull it off, I think it was a level of successful there for it. But I think it's so apart for what he was doing in the 7 title matches leading up to this that like it feels like kind of out on an island. This is Yamato just kind of getting to do a different kind of match that sometimes that happens in these longer Dreamgate runs. And that's kind of my big takeaway for it, that I didn't dislike it, but I do think that if there was not the heel versus Yamato pulling out the heel aspect, or the what felt like constant chokes and getting out of there, that maybe a Yamato versus Jason Lee, when you remove that trappings, might have been the better match for me.
I found everything from when Jason had Yamato in a sleeper hold and Yamato climbed up to the middle rope and did the backdrop off the rope. Everything from that point on, I think, had every bit of drama that I would want from a Dreamgate match. Now, obviously, the structure of this match meant that drama looked different than it did for Dragon Die, and meant that it looked different than it did for KZ, but I think they got to the point that I was looking to get to just in a different way. I was still really blown away by the work in this match. The thing that I noted, like when the Strong Machine J match happened, it was like a 23-minute match, and we talked about how it flew by. It felt like they had 10 more minutes in the tank. We can't believe it was only 23 minutes.
No, this one felt 20 minutes every minute of the 20 minutes,
which I liked. It felt really brutal. Again, the Ishin match was good because Yamato got his ass kicked and he survived. And Ishin looked like a brute. He looked tougher. He just wasn't as smart as Yamato. And it was nice to have like a 6-month refresh on that concept, just executed in a different way, where, the large portion of this match, Jason Lee had his number, and I thought Jason Lee's heel work was super compelling, and it took Yamato, again, not being tougher than Jason Lee, not being more powerful than Jason Lee, but, being smarter than Jason Lee to win this match. I understand that it was one of those where, look, it's not the flashy classic Dreamgate match that you would expect, but they went and told a story, and that story worked for me.
No, I think that's entirely fair. It's an interesting match. I feel like the main event, this is going to be a match that years now will be like, oh yeah, no, and that was all based around the choke. Like, that actually was like an interesting Dreamgate match. Like, it is one of those things that I do feel like a lot of the show, with the power of hindsight, will be looked back a little bit more fondly than 24 hours later. But Case, the moment of the show for me, and what I thought was the match of the night, and the thing that even 24 hours afterwards, I'm still a little bit buzzing about, Case. Not only bad things happen on Dead or Alive 2025, we did not completely end on a sour note in Dolphins Arena. The boyhood dream of one Yuta Tanaka was finally accomplished as UT becomes the newest Open the Brave Gate champion, defeating Homare with the Bien Llave Perfecto. The lifelong dream happened. One of those moments that that this promotion can really draw from its fans is when you follow someone and you get to see kind of the bumps in the road of their entire career, how even fulfilling it is as a fan and as a viewer to have a match like UT finally getting the Brave Gate after 3 shots in this building.
It seems impossible that this happened in the best way possible, where the odds have been so stacked against UT for the better part of a decade now. This is where, Jay is so invaluable on commentary, being able to tell the story of UT in the way that he did, and Jay telling the story about being there in Kyoto when Dragon Kid kicked his face off, and it set off this chasm of, broken collarbone, broken arm, MCL injury, just all these different things that UT has gone through. And I found this match to be all that more compelling. I think this match would have been incredible in the same timeline, but in 2017. But when you look at, Riki Hashi going away and Shoya Sato retiring because of injuries and Kaito Nagano retiring because of injuries and Tien Revolution retiring because of injuries, for UT to still be here and to be this good and to be this vibrant and to have a match that felt fully authentic in the way that it's UT in Nagoya one last time. He's in there against a 1,000% heel. It wasn't a tweener match. It wasn't him and Susumu. Even when he wrestled Akuda in this building, it was sort of the last thing Akuda ever did that people liked. This was UT set up in the perfect environment to have this match, and he had it. It is up there, not quite on the level of Goto, but man, it is one of the feel-good wrestling moments of the year.
Yeah, I was 4 on this. I thought that this was just an incredibly told match. Homare, I know I laid the case for why he should turn babyface, but God, for someone who is just who is still a child in a lot of ways, having the wherewithal to start a match where UT, I mean, he's in his hometown. He got 20 or so bouquets to start, and Homare going, I know what I'm going to do. Just attack him relentlessly in the ring, outside the ring, and everywhere with every bouquet I can get my hands turned on. Just like a classic heel performance from someone who is still, he does have he has a cage match profile now, right? Like we are, like he is that far along, but you still like have to kind of just blink your eyes and go like, no, this guy is 9 months into his wrestling career, being able to do this level of heel work, and then UT just in a way showing some new innovations to his offense. That slingshot code breaker was really, really sick. And then also you had him basically being able to study this guy and going like, I'm dodging the super kick, don't want the super kick, and then eating and having an answer to almost all of Homare's holds, and then having him in like his ultra submission finish. It was just everything that you want to happen, and then the celebration felt incredibly earned, and if anything is the moment I'm going to remember from the show for a long time.
It's weird there's a part of me that wants to be sour on this, just in the idea of, okay, well, what now? Because I knew if Homare had the Bravegate belt, every single match would be fresh and it would be this great thing. And now I'm not sure, again, this goes back to what we were talking about with Jay over the weekend, which, by the way, if you haven't heard the Jay show, I guess I should note, it's in theory a Dead or Alive preview, but of the 3 hours, I would say 2 hours are dedicated to stuff that is entirely not Dead or Alive related. And the Dead or Alive stuff,
45 minutes to the greater aspects of hustling.
Yeah, it is a really interesting look at Dragongate business specifically. A lot of the time with Jay, we talk about big picture Japanese stuff, and we get into a little bit of that, but he raises some points about Dragongate business that I thought were utterly fascinating. So don't be deterred if you missed it over the weekend. I know it was poor scheduling on our part that it came out on a Saturday, 2 days before Dead or Alive, but it's really not a Dead or Alive podcast as much as it is a typical Jay episode where we dive into a million different things. And one of the points that he brought up was, again, we're now missing out on an entire generation of guys where there's, the effects of Kenshin Chikano and Yohei being expelled from Dragongate through Lindemann being gone, Ishida being gone, Yamamura being gone, Nagano being gone, all these possible Bravegate guys are just gone. And so it's left us with a division that is now going to be headed by UT. And I think he's just going to run back through that bracket. I think you're going to get Kame, and you're going to get Rita, and you're going to get Tanaka. And honestly, I would put the belt on Tanaka right now because I think he is just doing a level of work that is exceptional. Maybe you might get a Dragon Kid match. Maybe you might get a Fuda match or a Daiki match or a Hyo match. But it is the fatal flaw in this booking right now. And it's, because of the restrictions they put on the Bravegate division, there's just not a lot of Bravegate guys out there. I think long-term, the safer bet would be Homare. I honestly would, I would do Homare versus UT and Korakuen, and I would have Homare win the belt, or do it at World and have Homare win the belt. I would run this match back just because it was so good the first time. But even my long-term reservations, I cannot dispute that this was an incredible moment and one that was entirely worth doing on this show.
I think we could make this the Sickos division with UT's run, because you have Yamato and the other stuff happening up on the top of the card case. Are you to tell me that that if I got the pencil and we wouldn't have UT versus Rita, you would not be salivating at the possibilities of that?
Look, I'm all for it. I don't see them doing that. I think they have a certain way that they want these Bravegate matches to look. I wish every UT match felt like UT versus Shisa on Prime Zone 7 years ago, but that's the only match that's felt like that. It's the outlier in this equation.
Can Shisa make 82 kilos at his age right now?
I don't think so.
My UT Bravegate run would be like, all right, he's going to need to hold it until Fujita Junior Hayato is back wrestling again, basically, is if I was in control of this case.
UT versus Estrella would be fun. I'm curious to see if we get that.
Yeah, UT versus Estrella, yes, no. The overall Bravegate situation, I can understand, Yamato shelved it, and then you kind of put it on the oldest guy in the tournament. That does, there is that aspect of it. I don't think, as much as I'm fan booking UT to have 12 defenses right now. That's not reality. I mean, there's a part of me that wonders, like, do you do like a quick defense over the next 60 days and then put it and then strap up Homare at Kobe World at this point?
I would. I mean, again, I would run that match back, and I would get the belt on Homare. I would. I mean, I would have been in favor of doing it at the May Cork, and I'd be in favor of doing it at the June Cork and shows. I'd be in favor of doing it at World. Yeah, I think
until Homare has the Bravegate title, you will not be satiated.
Well, it's just look. UT is an awesome wrestler, and I feel like I'm dogging him here, and I don't mean to, because this match was very, very good, and the moment was utterly phenomenal. But it's not getting better than this. Get the belt off of him, because it's not getting better than this. That doesn't mean that he can't be Bravegate champion again. And I think the nice thing is, because we've seen, especially over the last 15 years of wrestling, the idea that you can only win the belt for the first time once has been something that has fallen on deaf ears. And I think we've seen a lot of, and this is not a Dragongate problem, this is a larger wrestling issue, where guys win their first title in a weird scenario. The one Dragongate instance is Mate. I hate the way that Mate won the Dreamgate belt, and I think they set him up for failure. But UT now has that first win in this first reign. It couldn't have gone better. He can lose that belt and win it again. What's the difference in UT's legacy between being a one-time Bravegate champion and two-time Bravegate champion? It doesn't matter at the end of the day. They got the moment they needed to. They got to get the belt off of him now.
Yep, no, that's fair, and I don't anticipate this going much longer. However, in the Spears reality, my God, I think I'd either get like I'm blanking on his name, the guy that was Rita's MMA trainer. I would have
Ito.
Yeah, he's facing UT in my reality too. Like we're bringing back Billion, and it's just going to be World of Sport rounds UT Bravegate title matches.
Well, this is the bummer, is that I think there's a number of interesting things they could do. I don't necessarily think they're going to do them, but again, none of my reservations about this Bravegate run are related to UT. It's more the way that they handle the Bravegate division entirely, and I think they're going to have a little bit more freedom and a little bit more intrigue if that belt gets back on Homare at some point. But with UT, I mean, look, guys, we can only hope that he has kick-ass matches. I certainly believe that he can with anybody that he wrestles, so it'd be nice to see. I feel like this is a reign that has already peaked, and that is through no fault of anybody. They did the right thing here. They did the perfect thing. Homare at this point, I think, has to be a 30 under 30 guy.
He's on my list at this point. I feel like that if you have a list without Homare, you're kind of showing yourself.
Well, it's tough, because one of the reasons, and this is happening in the Voice of Wrestling Slack, so it's not entirely for public consumption like the Discord is, but I laid out all the Dragongate guys that are under 30, in part just to be like, hey, here's who you can vote for, but also just to be like, okay, so that, Dragongate typically has a high level of representation in this thing. It tends to rub people the wrong way, but also you have to remember that it's a promotion that is now made up of main eventers, mid-carders, and rookies that are under the age of 30. Their per capita of wrestler under 30 is quite high. So
it has to be outside, especially when you're talking about men's promotions. It has to be the highest in Japan right now. Outside training school promotions.
Even I was surprised at just how few CMLL guys you can really vote for. But Dragongate, it's Daya, Hyo, Isha, Minoru, Kakuta, Skywalker. Those are the main eventers. The mid card is Kame, Jr., Rita, Tanaka, Kato, and then your rookies are Sahara, Yanagiuchi, Homare, and Fuda, with a giant question mark on how well Strong Machine J is at this point. So just big picture, I'm going to vote for Daya. I'm going to vote for Ishin. I'm going to vote for Kakuta. I'm going to vote for Skywalker. That's already 4 guys. Kame's a mortal lock. Junior's a mortal lock. Rita's a mortal lock. Tanaka's a mortal lock. I think I'll leave Kato out. I just haven't seen enough. So now you're at
9
guys.
Right
You're at 8 guys with me, and then Sahara, Yanagiuchi, Homare, Fuda. It's going to be tough because Sahara's hurt, and I don't think he's going to have a chance to add anything. I feel like I can cut Yanagiuchi because there is more depth than there was last year. Fuda, no chance. I think I can live with myself if 9 of my 30 are Dragongate guys, and that 9th guy is Homare, because it's similar to we weren't doing 30 under 30 at the time, but in 2022, I fought really hard to have Takuma Fujiwara on SFM50, with the idea being that I would feel silly witnessing this historically great run that he had and then not including him in something like this. And I do think, Homare's first year of eligibility, he should probably be represented. I mean, in 8 months, it's the debut match against Mochizuki. a really strong title match here. He's wrestled Marufuji Sugiura and then Bushi Hiromu and Shingo, and he's just been really fun in almost every setting he's been in.
Yeah, I guess like in my mind, I don't really have issues with quota, and that's if people don't accept a reality that that major promotion is at least a third to maybe 40% represented by people under age of 30, and that means that it might have a stronger representation. That's on them at a certain point, I guess. Like
I'm hyper aware of it. You know, I realize that there's a certain reputation that I have, and that, you know, I would like to have a fair and balanced 30 under 30. You know, I would like to have a balance.
But is it fair and balanced if you feel like you have to prohibit yourself? Like I would not have Kato, Sahara, and Daiki on my list, but I mean, I feel like you're being a little like, and I understand like the reputation at least like the two of us have, but I feel like that this is kind of a thing where like I anticipate my ballot to basically be Dragongate and Joshi, because that's kind of like the places that have like the best, like maybe not like top of the card stuff, because you have your Ozawas, your Anzais, and people like that, but it to like fill up like underneath your top 10, I just because of how promoting kind of works and the talent development systems, those are the ones that I feel like are the ones that are more geared to have more representation on a list like that.
You gonna vote for Kota Minoura? You think he's gonna make your 30?
No, but Kaito Ishida is still under 30, man.
Yamamura, I'm floating. I can't quit that idea just yet. I gotta say on Minoura, just to go back to the cage match real quick. We spent 45 minutes talking about this match. You know, Daya gets hurt, so he's his own thing. But you have these really, I won't even say good or very good or great. You have these really memorable performances from Daya, from Kakuta, from Yoshioka, from Shun, from Ishin, from Valletta, from Tanaka. Mike, tell me a thing that Kota Minoura did in that match.
He emptied an entire bag of powder on Yuki Yoshioka, then grabbed his flag and left. That is fair. I use a digital pad for my notes, and I have it legal style. My notes for the steel cage match are a page long. That is my only Minoura note I have on the entire match.
I was just thinking as I was writing my review, where it's like, you know, normally in these cage matches, you know, I try to highlight every escape and, you know, just make sure that it's got a certain flow to it, but also that it's doing the, for lack of a better term, you know, the journalistic job of noting what happened for, you know, the future. And I realized after I put it into the drafts, I was like, man, I don't have anything about Minoura getting out of the cage, but you know what? It was like the least memorable cage escape in history. I mean, this guy did absolutely nothing in that match, in a match where a million things were happening. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, no. Like, we all strikingly remember Ishin going, "Oh, everyone's distracted. I'm just going to slide out here right now." Nothing for Kota Minoura other than he had the powder attack on the in the match that had to happen.
I can't believe that with him. That it's just time after time he gets put in these big spots, and, you know, I guess I'd much rather prefer Minoura in neutral like he was here than Minoura in overdrive where he's being overbearing. But it's just like, God, you know. How does that? How are you in this match and you're just a complete afterthought?
It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And yeah, I guess you've seen the meme of the three-headed dragon that like two of the heads are looking fierce and the other one's dopey. Yeah. No, that's Minoura for me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's in any context. That is Shun Ishin Minoura. That is Shun Kakuta Minoura. That is Shun Jason Minoura. That
is Shun Ishin Kato, or that's Ishin Kato Minoura.
Yeah, I mean, that guy did nothing in that match. I can't believe it. I really thought, you know, again, it's, you know, it would make sense if he was in Ishin's spot as the sixth guy out of the sixth. And it was a forgettable performance. But no, he's like one of the main guys in this big match. And it's just, I don't want to say he laid an egg, because, again, like, we've seen the opposite of this where we can't take our eyes off of him for the worst reasons. But this was just a total nothing. I was really, really taken aback by that.
Yeah, I guess you can say as a motivation of, oh, he left Shun in a 2-on-1 situation. Like you can say that if you really want to get something out of it, but in reality, all he really did was dump powder and leave.
Yes.
Well, we haven't talked about the Triangle Gate match. We have new Open the Triangle Gate champions as Natural Vibes defeat the Paradox team of Susumu, Hulk, and Kagatora. KZ, Strong Machine J, and Flamita are your new champion team after Machine Suplex and a really high action finish with SMJ and Susumu. And whereas like Yamato and Jason Lee was a bit more of a bruising, slowly paced match, they really just shoved everything in the first 10 minutes of that match, and I loved it.
Yeah, look, I think they got out on Paradox at a time in which we can all leave this reign going like, man, that was a ton of fun, and that's going to be our historical memory of the Hulk, Kagatora, Susumu Triangle Gate run in 2025, which, hey, that's a massive win, because if you would have sold me on that a year ago, I would have said, I don't know if that's the best idea with Hulk or Kagatora, and we got great outings out of both of them throughout this entire reign. So good stuff there. I mean, for as right as I was about the finish of the main event, I was as wrong about the state of Natural Vibes. They go Triangle Gate and Brave Gate coming out of this show, which I was not expecting at all, but I'm not going to complain, because now you've got a belt on Flamita, and that means Flamita is going to be doing big stuff. I would really, really hope that they headlined one Hokkaido show with a Triangle Gate match. I would hope that we get one in Cork, and I would hope we get, obviously one at World. I would use Flamita as much as humanly possible in big spots until he goes home in July.
Yeah, and you have the two kind of tent poles of Natural Vibes around him, and especially with a Hokkaido triple shot, it really kind of sets them up to have at least a pretty active summer going into World there. And it kind of now, like, after this fun run for Paradox here, it's interesting now how I kind of expect Susumu, Hulk, and Kage to kind of flow and maybe tag out for DK and Doi for their roles in kind of the undercard in a way. Like they really got off at the right point where you can just kind of slide them in and out, and it's not going to feel like a negative thing whatsoever.
No, I'd agree with that.
But yeah, no, a fun title match. I was 3 3/4 on it. Just like it felt like they really crammed a lot into it, and a lot of strong work from some of the older guys. Like Hulk had a wild bump off of a shoulder check just to start the match. He did Yohei's full tornado splash and landed as a bump here. So Hulk's doing fine.
I don't know how he still does it. I would expect this to kind of be the last thing that Hulk does of note for the rest of the year. I could be wrong, but it feels like he gave 6 months of his body to this reign, and I would expect him to be opening match BB Hulk for quite some time now.
Match 3 was a 10-man tag. The entirety of Gold Class Benkei, Mochizuki Jr., Rita, and Jackie Kamei teaming with the new arrival Bendito. He was here for the shows in Kyoto and Kobe Art Center before this, and they went up against the assorted veteran team of Ultimo Dragon, Naruki Doi, Dragon Kid, Don Fuji, and Luis Monte. A hell of a spear on Fuji to win it for the Gold Class and Bendito team.
Very fun. I had a conversation with somebody about the projected idea of what Bendito is going to do while he's on tour, and it was not join Gold Class and wrestle in all of their matches, but I'm kind of hoping they pivot to maybe Bendito's a Gold Class guy.
That costume in gold would look great.
It would. And that costume in black looks great. I'd buy it well enough. They've got black trim on their gear. Just let Bendito keep on doing what he's doing. It's going to be one of those things. It's going to be fun to track Bendito's progress as we go throughout his 3-month tour, because there is still very much a part of him. Reckless is obviously not the right word, but he's just not as buttoned up, let's say.
He's 23.
He's ginormous. I mean, he's so much taller than most of the guys on this roster, but also, just in ring, move to move. He's not as buttoned up as some of these other guys are. In July, by the time he heads home, I think he's going to be unbelievably great come July. I'm very, very excited to see him finish out this tour and see how much he progresses. Yeah,
no, that's going to be a fun story to track. You got to have a couple of Ultimo and Dragon Kid moments in matches like this. Dragon Kid doing a Super Frankensteiner in a building that he's had a lot of big matches in felt like a feel-good moment. And Ultimo having to deal with the kids that don't respect him in Gold Class was very funny.
Absolutely. No, this undercard.
It was fun.
it was 3 matches that I think totaled 15 minutes. I mean, it was really quick, but it was really enjoyable.
Yep, match 2 was the remainder of RAD, Johnny Valletta, Kai and Yoshiki Kato versus Mochizuki Dojo, Masaki Mochizuki, Daiki Yanagiuchi, and Ryu Fuda. It was a Karare Luna into a King Kong knee drop on Mochi to get the win there. Afterwards, Mochi tries to stick up for his students. He gets laid out, and Sahara and Fuda try to stop it as well, and they get kind of beaten down. And really, this was just in service of the match on Friday against Mochi versus Johnny, but it was fun 3 minutes.
I can't wait for this match on Friday. I unfortunately, my hopes are too high for it, but I love that they built to a Korakuen match on the undercard. I thought that was super fun. They don't always do that.
Yep, no, that was a blast, and a real blast was the opener of the main show. Hyo versus Ryoya Tanaka. They only got 6 minutes, but they did everything you could do in 6 minutes, including crowd work. Ryoya Tanaka wins with his springboard Stardust press / twisting press splash. Big upset, I feel like, to open the card there, and Tanaka's looking really strong as the unit around him falls to absolute pieces.
100%. This is a result you need to flag. You need to remember this is a result that is going to mean something. I don't know what it means right now, but I know it's going to mean something here pretty soon. 6-minute match. I thought it was a perfect 6 minutes of wrestling. Every single thing they did was done to the highest degree possible of execution. I thought the work here was so snug. It was so crisp. Hyo, it's funny because it's weird to say that a guy who, as we talked about last year on a show in, show out basis was the most over guy on a period of time for these shows. But it does seem like post America, Hyo is wrestling with a newfound level of confidence. I think he really jumped off the screen of this match. But the Tanaka piece of this is the thing that you cannot ignore, that this guy is now 2 years into his career by the end of the month, and it's happening with him. He has taken that leap. There is something there, and there is something there that is undeniable. And Tanaka has gone from being, I would say very good from almost his first match onwards to now he is trending towards a new territory and leveling up in a way that is really exciting. So make a note of that finish with Tanaka beating Hyo, and make a note of Tanaka in general, because I think they're doing something with him, and I think they're doing something with him soon.
Yep, keep an eye on him. He might be someone that just walks into Kobe World and rips that belt off of UT too.
Well, he's going to get too big to do it. He's kind of in a Homare situation where they've got to do it soon if they're going to do it.
Yep, no, that's fair to say. And we got to see the advanced match. It was Sakashi Yoshida and Mondai Ryu versus Genki Horiguchi. And since we were in Nagoya one last time, Sachioka Machine came down from Nagoya Castle. Big 2008 vibes, really, here. What you expect with these 4 guys in a dark match. I mean, you could call it in your head, Case.
Yeah, very much so.
And that was Dead or Alive 2025. Farewell to Aichi Prefectorial Gymnasium at Dolphins Arena. And we move on quickly, Case, to this show that we've been talking about offhandedly throughout the show. We've got a Korakuen on Friday, Case. Would you like me to run down our card?
I would love that.
So on it is Hopeful Gate in Korakuen Hall. It's a 5:30 start time for the East Coast of the United States. That's 6:30 locally in Japan. That's 9:30 GMT. We have an advanced match here. This time it's Problem Dragon and Punch Tominaga versus Kai and Ishin. Match 1, Yuki Yoshioka, fresh off getting his head shaved. He's facing the spiritual, the favorite man in Korakuen Hall, Daiki Yanagiuchi, former worker. He will be there against Yuki Yoshioka. We're getting a little bit of a flashback to last year. Luis Monte and Hyo are tag teaming, this time against Toru Owashi and Bandito. I think this might be Toru Owashi's last Dragongate booking, I think.
Or
is he going through June?
I think June.
June, yeah, because he's going to finish it off with that show in Kyoto.
Hey, real quick, I'm going to interrupt here, then we'll talk about the rest of the card. Do you think anybody would notice if they just plugged Monte into D-Courage and said, what are you talking about? He's been here the whole time.
I feel like that it either has to go like into that direction, or he's just going to be like awkwardly unaffiliated until the next big shuffle.
Well, yes, the plan for Monte is to take some time off after Kobe World, so it would not surprise me if he just remains unaffiliated through the summer. So also don't panic when he goes back to Mexico in July. As of right now, that's the plan. We'll see if things change. But I've heard from reliable sources that is the plan for Mache to take some time off after July, after Kobe World. Yeah, I just feel like you could put him in D-Courage and be like, well, I also have a issue with Shun Skywalker. Let's team up together, and the world would keep spinning as if nothing ever happened.
Yeah, D-Courage just becomes the Shun Skywalker haters club, basically.
Which is funny because you could also say that same thing about Natural Vibes, or you could say the same thing about Gold Class. It's amazing what happens when you have an effective heel at the top of your company.
That is true. Speaking of heels, match 3, we get a lot of Z-Brats here. Kota Minoura and Jason Lee are Open the Twin Gate champions. Yoshiki Kato and Homare, they're going up against Paradox, Dragongate, Susumu Yokosuka, Kagatora, and Naruki Doi. Man, there are some decorated former Twin Gate champion teams face off against the champions here.
Yeah, I really like this match. I'm intrigued to see. What do you think? Are we getting Susumu and Kagatora or Doi and Dragon Kid?
You can go either way. I wonder if they're still a little bit tentative around Kid, though.
I certainly would be.
Yeah, so, but either of those pairs, but what if Kagatora says, you know what, I want to team with Doi, and he gets the win?
Well, okay. If you would have said that to me a few months ago, I would have said, yeah, that's cool. But you got to remember, Susumu and Kagatora were so good in Rey de Parejas.
They were.
I
know.
In the same, hold on, let me look. Were they in the same block? Did they already
No,
wrestle?
they weren't,
because
unless it was 2 years ago in Rey de Parejas, because Dragon Kid wasn't in it last year or this year.
No, Kagatora and Susumu against. Okay, in Gifu, Kagatora and Susumu beat Jason Lee and Kota Minoura. I think, wouldn't that be a fun main event for one of the June Korakuen shows, a Twin Gate match with Lee and Minoura against Kagatora and Susumu?
Yeah, and especially considering the matches that original Jimmys have had in this building. I'm here for that.
Okay, I was thinking about this. I'm going to bring this up now. I know we're near the end, but I was thinking about Z-Brats and just what to do with them. And if you're going to keep most of these guys together, let's live in this hypothetical scenario in which you've got Minoura, Kakuta, Shun all in the same unit, and they stay in the same unit for an extended period of time. And I was thinking about, it's like, okay, well then what do you do at World with any of those guys? It's just, I was trying to put together matches in my head. And this is something that I had given up hope on a long time ago. I feel like my hope for this got beaten out of me in 2015. So it's not like this is something that I hit the pillow at night every night thinking about and going like, oh man, maybe one day they'll change it. But the way that they book the Triangle Gate belts is still so frustrating to me. It just feels like that is still a position where that, you could do, let's say, Minoli loses the Twin Gate belts, whatever. You could do Kakuta, Shun, and Minoura versus Daya, Yoshioka, and let's just, for the sake of argument, let's go full circle and say Monte, or let's say Tanaka. There's still 3 guys in D-Courage: Daya, Yoshioka, Tanaka. That feels like that should still be able to headline Kobe World, but we've lived through 15 years of devaluing these Triangle Gate belts in a way that is just so frustrating. And I was thinking about this in part because it was a year ago in May. This May Korakuen show was headlined by Vibes versus Z-Brats in a Triangle Gate match, and I remember going like, "Oh my god, how fun! A Triangle Gate match is actually headlining a show that matters." And I'm frustrated that we don't have in Korakuen and in Osaka more Twin and Triangle Gate matches headlining shows. It's a very long-winded point, but I was thinking about that this week.
Yeah, and especially given the amount of star power that you have in some of those Triangle Gate teams too.
Yeah, it should. Those matches should feel bigger than they do. I don't know. I've always found that puzzling. That you had 2005, you had all the success with the promotion really being built around the Dream Gate belt as a 1A and the Triangle Gate belts as a 1B, and then towards the end of the year more of a 1 and 2 situation, but. They've never really gotten back to that. And it just feels like you have the right roster to really make those Triangle Gate belts important. And I just don't think they're going to do it.
You really wish they would, though, a little bit because of, you're in a situation where you only have 4 belts. So you should really try to prioritize the value of them because not everyone has those title belts, and especially in scenarios where you can have trios matches are built so you can have a superstar and then people who aren't superstars in it. And just seems like a missed opportunity sometimes.
Yeah, it's a 15-year issue that I don't think is going to be resolved anytime soon.
No, that's entirely fair. Well, you talked about 15-year case. How about celebrating 28 years as match 4 on Friday, the 28th anniversary of Don Fuji? He's going up against the principal Ultimo Dragon, and there's a part of me that goes like, oh hell yeah, Don Fuji's another year, into his career, but it also makes you think like, oh yeah, I remember who else was in that debut match as well, and he's kind of in the point in the roster where it's just like, oh, I guess he has to wrestle Ultimo on those matches.
I can't imagine a bigger difference in energy between the Don Fuji Ultimo Dragon match and the match that follows it.
Yep, that's right. The match that I have underlined and starred and circled: Yamato and BB Hulk versus Shun Skywalker and the newly heel Madoka Kakuta.
I would expect something big here, and I don't know what that big thing is, but I'm 9 out of 10 excited for this match. I feel like that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I just like with how the schedule is, like I don't know if you're going to. I know I spent the last hour and a half thinking like, oh, we're going to get a Kobe World main event coming out of this match, but now thinking about the double Korakuen in June, could you have a scenario where I guess more likely Kakuta, with like the way we've been operating, beats Yamato here, and then you do 2 preview matches in Korakuen, or do you feel like you have to do that title match and then do another one for Kobe World?
Are you? I'm confused on what you're asking.
Do you think that from this match we get an immediate title match, or do you think they're able to string that out all the way for the next 2 months?
Oh, I would assume they string it out. But again,
okay.
There's a part of me that, as odd as this is going to sound, given everything that's happened, there's a part of me that's not convinced that it's going to be Kakuta or Skywalker challenging Yamato. And I don't have an immediate counter to, well, it's not going to be those two. It's going to be this guy. But I don't know. It's not. I'm not totally. I would say the betting odds favorite is Kakuta, but I'm not totally there yet and going like, yep, lock it in.
Yeah, and it almost in a way, like, just because timing and everything, there's a part of me that goes like, do you blow off the Kakuta situation next month, and you're big, oh, who's going to be Dreamgate challenger? Well, who now has not a lot going on for him right now, and has a lot of kind of new possibilities and doesn't have like the shackles before. I would put out, and this is just a wild idea, that maybe this is the year that Shingo's in play.
Yeah, that doesn't feel right to the spirit of this Yamato run.
It doesn't feel right to the spirit of the run, but I mean, Kano walked in.
Well, yeah, I don't know. If it's not going to be Kakuta or Shun, it should be Yoshioka.
I don't know if Yoshioka's rebuild is going to be done in 2 months.
I know that's the tough part, because it's just it's a funny thing where I think you could talk me into yes Kakuta, yes Shun, or yes Yoshioka, and yet I'm not sure that any of those matches are going to be the world main event.
Right, yeah, but maybe we have some indication coming out of Korakuen, the semi-main event of the show. We've been talking about this match for the last few weeks, Case. It's Masaki Mochizuki, Tokyo native, the last of the veterans, going one-on-one against the Showa generation killer, Johnny Valletta.
9 out of 10 excitement level for the Kakuta debut heel match, and a 10 out of 10 excitement level for this match.
Where I am 11 out of 11 for our main event, Hyo contra Hyo. Gold class Benkei, Rita, Jackie Kamei, and Mochizuki Jr. versus Strong Machine J, KZ, UT, and Flamita. Not only does that look like a great match, I'm 11 out of 10 because looking at this show, we're going to have something wild happen at the end of this match.
What do we think happens?
I think Hyo goes, you know what, I start my own unit, and we're going to see him maybe with some people that are deciding to turn face. You kind of talked me into the idea of Hyo and Ishin.
It just doesn't this seem like it's going to be one of those where the match is 20 minutes long and the post-match angle is 35 minutes long?
Right. Yeah, no, and I'm really excited to basically be like, I have to watch this half hour of a post-match angle before we go do something Saturday. Have to. I have to see where Hyo and the Stuffed Leopard go.
I mean, vibes feel, well, I was going to say vibes feel off limits, but that's because we're working under the assumption that Hyo's starting his own unit, which has been my take all along. I feel like the stipulation is a red herring. So you would put everybody in vibes off limits because they've all got belts, but otherwise it feels like fair game. It feels like Hyo could kind of poach anybody.
Yeah, Hyo could be like, hey, Rita, you're kind of cute like me. Come with me. And
Yeah,
he'd be like,
very much so.
Yeah, fair. I mean, one in the same goal class, but the logic's there sound. I mean, it feels like that there is a time that with the way that Dead or Alive ended, that it ended on that sad note, and now at least in Tokyo, like an opportunity to kind of, I know Golden Week's over, but kind of leave that period on a positive and at least excitement at new opportunities and what the unit landscape might be.
If you had to pick between Gold Class and Natural Vibes, which would you want him on?
Man, I think we're gonna come to a reality when there's a time that everyone has been in Natural Vibes, and maybe this is Hyo's time to go off the list, because I feel like you're able to plug people into that unit. He already has his dance and all of that, and you're able to have someone else who's able to play off of SMJ and be able to kind of really then be like, okay, the new generation leadership, SMJ and Hyo, there's an aspect there with Natural Vibes, but the idea of the Gold Class rebrand is really compelling.
I'm interested in seeing him in Vibes. I think that's a little bit. Gold Class is, again, it kind of goes back to my. There's some stuff I don't want to touch, I don't want to mess with, and Gold Class in its current state is one of those things.
Yeah, I just want to see Benkei and the boys. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's such a fun energy with them, even with Jackie Kamei's overalls.
Yes, well said.
But that, I think, will do it this week, Case. And unless you had anything else you want to touch on before we got out of here.
I do not.
Well, that's it for this week on Open the Voice Gate. Next week, we will be back talking about Korakuen. And then, Case, before we know it, we'll be back with those days talking about J-Cup and one of the biggest shows in Michinoku Pro history.
That's right. Obviously, next week, the Korakuen review, but the week after that, those days, the Michinoku Pro podcast will return.
Yep. And you can follow us on social media at Open VoiceGate, both on X, the Everything app, and Blue Sky. Case is on Twitter at _InnerCase. I'm at Fuji Heya. If you'd like to join the conversation, stop inside the Voices of Wrestling Discord. It's where we have a Dragongate channel where a lot of folks were at least like live watching the show and reacting there as well for Dead or Alive. But in general, we have matches of the week, a lot of really fun stuff, good community there, as well as the Open the Voice Gate channel, which is the place where we have scheduling updates, match listings. It all goes up there. You just join the Voices of Wrestling Discord and check that out. But that's going to do it for us this week. Thanks for listening to Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week. Take care, everyone.
Hi, I'm Case Lowe, co-host of the Open the Voice Gate podcast. The one question I'm constantly asked when it comes to Dragongate is, how do I get into the promotion? Well, stop asking and start listening to the Open the Voice Gate podcast, released every Wednesday on the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. For exclusive news and show reviews, look no further than the leader in Dragongate coverage, Open the Voice Gate.